Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell your family and friends all about the podcast. And please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Corey Wolff. He's returning to the show to celebrate Mikey McMonsterson Goes to School. Before we invite Corey back into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by History Unboxed. Are you teaching history from a textbook? Whether you're a homeschool family, charter school parent, or classroom teacher, there is a better way. Students love learning history the unboxed way. Why? Well, because History Unboxed makes history come alive. The adventure begins when you order a single box, sign up for a subscription, or purchase a complete curriculum. Families that become History Unboxed subscribers will receive a new box each month, exploring a different place and time according to the era that you selected. Become an ancient history subscriber and start exploring the ancient world as we take you on a tour of 18 of the most beautiful, influential, and fascinating places in history. Become a Middle Ages subscriber and go on an adventure to some of the most amazing, fascinating, and thrilling times in history. And learn the history of the United States of America and gain a new appreciation for the people, events, and cultures that formed our great nation by becoming an American History subscriber. Learn all about this and more at historyunboxed.com. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Happy Jack, Sad Jack, written by attorney and author Mark Bello. Jack has always been a very happy little boy, but when he starts kindergarten, he discovers that he's different from the others. For the very first time, he experiences bullying. Happy Jack suddenly becomes very sad Jack. What should Jack do? Should he tell an adult? His parents? Would his teacher or principal understand? What can they do to help? As parents, we all want certain things for our kids. Mainly, we want them to be happy. Can today's kids celebrate their differences, or are they doomed to fight over them like generations before? Happy Jack, Sad Jack, a bullying story, is a must-read for all children and one your child will never forget. Get your copy today, Happy Jack, Sad Jack, by Mark Bello. Join us right now from the beautiful Garden State of New Jersey. Our guest is returning to the podcast to celebrate his brand new picture book. It's called Mikey McMonsterson Goes to, what a mouthful, Mikey McMonsterson Goes to School. Please welcome back Corey Wolff. Hey, Corey, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show, Jed.
Thank you for exercising my speech so early in the morning with that with that great title.
Thank you. So, I remember when I was a boy, there was this commercial for, I think it was Chex cereal.
Uh-huh.
And they always said, give it to Mikey, he'll eat anything, right? And I don't know if you remember this commercial. And so, it was this cute little boy named Mikey, and he'd eat it, and they're like, Mikey likes it, right? So, yeah. I don't know, it's got me really thinking that it would be cute to name a monster Mikey, because, how could you really be scared of a monster named Mikey, right?
True. Absolutely. Absolutely. As you're saying that, there's a young man here in the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville who is a great guy. I've known him all his life. He's maybe 24, 25 years old. He just finished a tour as a Marine, and his name is Mikey, and he is a monster. He's just He's just a building of a person, but he is the sweetest person alive. He's just this very big, imposing, but the minute you see him, he has this just warm, genuine smile that just, if you were afraid of monstrous people, that smile would just melt it away. And so as you started talking about Mikey McMonsterson, that's who I thought of.
Yeah, well, sounds like he's a gentle giant, so it's good.
He truly is a great young man. So Mikey McMonsterson, he's a monster, but he doesn't act like a monster. That's what I'm getting from your description of the book.
Yeah, he's expected to do monster things like scare little boys and girls. And he would much rather smell flowers and take bubble baths. And, those things are frowned on by the residents of Monsterville. And so he runs away because he wants to be true to himself, and he's getting a lot of, negative feedback from everybody. So he's like, he decides to run away from home.
I guess if I were living in a monster neighborhood that, if I was smelling flowers and, liking poetry and all that kind of stuff and bubble baths, then, I probably wouldn't fit in.
Yeah, he doesn't fit in. And, that's something, when I wrote the book, I really wrote it for my son, because he was scared, like a lot of kids, of a monster under his bed. But as I was writing it, and after I really, thought back, and I'm like, it's really about it's about someone who's not accepted for who he is, and he ends up finding acceptance for who he is somewhere else. And I think that's a really beautiful and moving message in the story, that, because people, there's a lot of reasons why people are not accepted. And, I think he's true to himself. He wants to do good things for people and be kind. And he goes somewhere where that kindness is rewarded, and he's seen as, valuable. And I think that's a nice message for kids to take in.
Yeah, obviously there's lots of kids who feel like they don't fit in. In fact, I'm guessing it's safe to say that just about everyone at one point or another in their life feel like they don't fit in.
Yeah, well, I hope then people could identify with this, because, obviously, it's like a monster who runs away from home and goes and lives under this little boy's bed, and then they become friends. And it's like, but I think underneath that plot, there's that idea of like wanting to be accepted and striving to go somewhere where you will be. And, I think that's really touching to me, that at the end, he and the boy become friends, and they really become a family. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really sweet.
Yeah. Now, you were sharing with me, you are a teacher, and I'm sure that at various times you've experienced kids coming into your classroom who feel like they don't fit in or are excluded for one reason or another. Do you have any idea why? Let's go with the exclusion part. Any idea why at some point some group of kids just decide, yeah, we're not going to accept that person. We're not going to make that person feel welcome.
Sure. It's interesting that I think that there's like a lot of microaggression that people have. Let's say they just will turn their back on someone, mm-hmm. And little things like that. But especially, and that's hard even with kids that are typically developing. I happen to work at a special education high school. And so, my students have a variety of, challenges, but, if students have autism, for example, it's very hard. I mean, definitely communication is harder. Not being able to read social cues, not being able to regulate emotions as well. And obviously all kids, I think, are, try to develop that skill of regulating emotions. But I think that, it's easy to view someone as different, a little off from what they would expect, and to alienate them, to not be inclusive. And, that's really, not only is that hard as an adult to watch, but I can only imagine what it's like for a young person to have to experience that. So yes, I think it's something that I think our society has gotten better at, but still, people, especially younger people, I think they haven't developed a lot of that understanding of wanting to accept other people that may be, somewhat a little different. And, that's, I guess that's just a human experience. Like you're saying, just not feeling accepted in some way. And I guess as adults, we come to try to learn to accept ourselves for who we are, and to do things that are fulfilling internally.
Mm-hmm. Do you think sometimes parents have a hard time balancing, if they want their kids to be themselves, but they also want their kids to kind of fit in? And how do you think parents can kind of balance that with, encouraging kids to conform? You have to conform, a certain level to, succeed in school and be on a team or at a job as you grow up. But we also don't want to stifle their creativity, and we want them to be themselves and to express themselves. That seems to be like a really hard line to walk.
I agree. And, I think there's a lot of nuance to that type of thing. And I think it's really helpful that they have mental health professionals at a school, school social worker, especially if you're working. To be honest with you, all students in a general ed setting, people need support. COVID showed us that, even when people were coming back, the isolation, people need support people, not just teachers. And sometimes, especially with people that are, I'd say, eccentric and maybe on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of eccentric, smart, creative people on the autism spectrum that, they still may need some assistance with understanding. Like, listen, you could be yourself, but you also want to work on collaborating with other people, because you're going to need to, use skills of that nature when you get out of school. You need to be able to work as a team. You need to be able to listen to other people and validate, them. You can't just always do it your way. So I think that, they need people to help guide them in that process. And parents are certainly good at guiding as well, but, parents are older, but they also may need help with, how to navigate that with their kids.
Yeah. You were mentioning support people and professionals. And, one of the things we've talked a lot here on the podcast about the education system, and I'm not mentioning, referring to your school in particular, but it just seems like we don't give kids the kind of mental health support in schools that they really need. We think about the guidance counselor, but in most high school settings, there may only be one or maybe four serving a whole school of 1,200 kids. And in a high school setting, the guidance counselor's main job seems to be to help kids get into college. How do you think we can fix that to really get, okay, you're the college counselor and you're going to help the kids make those choices. But we also need people to help kids deal with their emotions, deal with their feelings, and develop the social skills that they need.
Yeah, and I think that bullying schools have much more awareness of bullying, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen. In fact, there's a lot more opportunity for bullying, especially with online now. But, when I was growing up, it wasn't something that was really addressed at all. Now I think that, they do try to, do workshops with kids and with adults, about like how to, what to do if you're feeling bullied, what is bullying? How does, what does it look like? That we shouldn't do that. It's not tolerated. And, I think there's more awareness, to be honest, now of at least when bullying is seen in school and being able to, I think students are encouraged. I know like with the Trevor Project, right? You've heard of that organization, but, there are a lot of teenagers that unfortunately, commit suicide, especially in the transgendered community. And I think that, it's important. And I think, suicide, you don't have to be transgendered, but there's people that are having these kinds of thoughts, and they should be encouraged to speak to a professional at the school to get some support. And I think that the adults also need to be very, very, watchful and, have their eyes open, especially like depression. That wasn't something that I think was picked up on 30 years ago. Now I think people are more sensitive to like, hey, maybe there's something going on with this kid, let me try to, refer him to someone at the school to speak to him, or her. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. This whole, Mikey McMonsterson is obviously targeted at younger kids, who may be going through this, who might be afraid that there's a monster underneath their bed. But I think that these issues are, the issues of not feeling accepted, not fitting in, not being included, they're kind of universal. And they certainly are issues that kids, as you mentioned, kids in high school are struggling with.
Absolutely. And another theme that I thought was really, important in the book is the boy, when Mikey hides under the boy's bed, it's just get out of the rain and he's feeling scared and it's dark, and the boy finds him. And if anything, he at first he's curious, like, why are you under my bed? Who are you? Right. But he's not afraid. And I think that's important that, we shouldn't, obviously you want to have a healthy concern, but we shouldn't always fear the unknown just because it's the unknown, and he's curious and open, and that's why they become friends. And it's something that he does, he embraces Mikey, and, he ends up taking him to school. I think that's also sweet too, that the boy does not have a fear. And I think that, will serve people well in life. Like I'm not saying, they should go up to everybody like strangers, but, it's good to be curious about the world, especially, when we get older, we forget about that. We forget about being curious, and we, get into our mindset, and we forget like to look at things with childlike eyes and explore.
Yeah. So important, especially when we're talking about people. I think you're right. I think at some point in our lives, we've had experiences, and adults will sit down and say, oh, well, that person fits into that group, and that means X, Y, and Z. And this other person fits into this other group, and that means something different. But bottom line, it means that I don't have to get to know them because I already know who they are just based on the stereotype that I have in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely something we don't want kids to fall into.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I also have a little subliminal message. There's a little, when I was a kid, I remember reading Danny and the Dinosaur, and there was this little advertisement that the author put in that book, and the dinosaur's hiding behind a billboard, and the billboard says, brush your teeth, with a picture of a boy with a toothbrush, right? And it made me think, like, I really want to put in like a positive message like that. So when they're in the cafeteria, there's a little picture on the wall, and it says, eat your veggies with some broccoli. Mm-hmm. I kind of liked putting that in.
Yeah. You make, You make a good point. You talked earlier on that Mikey McMonsterson in some ways was inspired by Mikey in the cereal commercial in your youth, and you're talking about it. We are affected by all these little tiny messages that we're not even aware of most of the time.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one thing I love about being an English teacher, and also being a writer is, I have the opportunity to, through a compelling story, to include positive messages in that narrative, that can really have an impact on a developing person.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think it opens up conversation between parents and kids.
Yeah.
And, I feel proud that I created that and honored that, other people might get something from that and improve, they may, help them to form positive values about the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons we started the podcast is to remind parents to spend that time reading books with kids, because it is such a great way to have conversations about values, to instill values in our kids, to help them face challenges, to get them to think, to open up their eyes and to explore the world. And I'm so happy that you're back with us to share Mikey McMonsterson Goes to School, and because I think it's a wonderful book to launch some of those conversations with parents.
Thank you. Yeah, it took me, it took so long to put it together. I mean, I had a great illustrator, but the images, although they're beautiful, they took time
Mm-hmm.
to do them all. And, after, it feels like it was like 4 years, maybe it was three or 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
To get all the illustrations, but I can't even believe it's done. I mean, I just stayed the course, and I was like, I really thought my son would be like maybe 20 by the time it would be done. And I'm like, well, I can't read this book to him. I'm like, I told him, maybe you could read it to your kids,
Well, what's next for Corey Wolff?
Well, I have another book that is also, that has come out this summer. This is for, young adults. It's called The Fantastical and Mysterious Tale of Sweet Pea of Monsterville. And I'm very excited to put that out. That's actually written mostly as an epic poem, and it rhymes. It's very exciting, and there's a lot of action in it, and also some great messages.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to talk about that sometime. But in the meantime, where can people go to find out more about Mikey McMonsterson Goes to School and all of the other great ideas coming from Corey Wolff?
Well, they can go to my website, which is CoreyWolff.com. That's CoreyWolff.com. And the books are on at Barnes & Noble online. They're at Amazon. They could be ordered at major bookstores, and they're on Walmart.com as well. And I'm also working on, as you could tell, I've got some important ideas, I think, about the world. And, I'm also launching a speaking career about childhood abuse. And I want to also speak to audiences about that, and, how it's important that you could overcome that, and that you could still lead a fulfilling life and help the world.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we're really excited that you're putting yourself out there, sharing these ideas and helping kids everywhere. And we want to thank you for doing that.
I thank you, Jed. I just love your podcast. Thank you for what you do, and, giving independent authors a venue to put out some really good ideas and have other people get exposure to them.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Mikey McMonsterson Goes to School, Corey Wolff. Corey, thanks for being back with us.
Thank you so much.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Nick Hulot. She is the author and illustrator of Patch of Sky. I had such a wonderful time speaking to Nick. What an amazing and talented young author. You're not going to want to miss it. It's talking about her debut picture book. She's an author. She's an illustrator. She's a filmmaker. She writes scripts for video games. We talk about all that stuff and more next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, we would love to help you tell the world all about it. It's so difficult as an author, whether you're traditionally published by a gigantic publishing house or if you're an independent author self-publishing your books. You are the person who is mainly responsible for getting the word about your book out there. And it can be difficult, but you don't have to do it alone. We would love to help you. There's so many ways that we can help you celebrate your book. You can be a guest here on the podcast and in a long-form conversation, tell the world about your book, about you, your brand, your inspiration, your goals. It's really wonderful. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost a thing. You can also submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read, letting families know that your book deserves a place on their family library. And, of course, you can take part in our monthly promotion program. This is something we're really excited about. It's a very affordable way to tell your story, let the world know about your book on multiple media platforms. There are commercials here on the podcast. There are multiple messages to our 100,000 social media followers. Your book will be displayed on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards. And your book will be displayed at whatever live event we'll be taking part in a given month. In September, your book could be on display at the PTO Today Expo in St. Louis, Missouri, being shown to educators and parents, involved parents from all over the Midwest. This is a really, really big event, and it's a great way to let families know about your book. Learn all about these opportunities and more by going to readingwithyourkids.com, clicking on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and scrolling on down to the various services. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, let's start by thanking our guest, Corey Wolff. Please be sure to check out Mikey McMonsterson Goes to School. Also want to thank Mark Bello. Please be sure to check out Happy Jacket, Sad Jack. And we want to thank our friends over at History Unboxed. We love History Unboxed. And I want to thank my team. I love my team. Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Bel Castro, Mirabella Q, Rain Pan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I love her. And I also love you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.